Welcome back to the Real Estate and Small Business Show. I am your host, Christian Carrillo. We're super excited about today's interview. Today, we are joined by Rob Stevens. Thank you for being on the show, Rob. We are so pumped to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to talk with you.
Absolutely. So Rob is the founder of CFO Perspective, where he provides finance and strategy resources to small business advisors and staff. He has been quoted in Forbes, U.S. News, World Report, Bloomberg Businessweek, and many other news sources. He is also the author of Key Performance Indicators and KPI Dashboards. Rob has 25 years worth of experience that includes serving as CFO, Director of Operations, and Senior Vice President of Finance. Rob is an adjunct instructor for the MBA program at Gonzaga University, and he holds a Master's of Science in Personal Financial Planning and a graduate certificate in Financial Therapy from Kansas State University. He received a BA in Business Administration from the University of Washington and is a CPA. Again, Rob, you and I were chatting earlier. I'm a big fan of all of your work. Truly incredible background. We're super pumped to have you here. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about who you are, right? Let's dive into your superpowers.
Well, who I am, I started CFO Perspective to work with small business owners. And what I really cared about when I worked in banking, I saw a lot of mistakes small business owners were making, individuals and small business owners. And particularly in the small business owner space, I didn't see as many resources to help small business owners understand the nature of business. There's lots of great business owners that understand the sales side of the business, understand the production side. They've got these great ideas. But at the end of the day, it's a business that has to fit together and make money and coordinate. And that was the piece that they sometimes didn't know or didn't want to spend time on. And that really took down a great idea was taken down by poor business management. So that's really what I love to do, is to dig in and help people better understand the financial and strategic side of the business to really help them live their dream. And that's part of the reason I love working with small business owners. Is it's not just about the money. I mean, this is truly their dream. There's so much that they're building this business for that, for the personal things or for the future, for their employees, that it's a lot of fun to work with small businesses.
Amazing. No, I love that. And we'll definitely dive into that more as we sort of progress through the show here. But I want to take a step back, right? Because you've got this just amazing brand now, right? Something you've built over the last couple of years. Where did you start, right? Like, how did you get into this, right? I think, part of our focus here on the show is to really help people understand the art of the possible, right? Coming out of school, folks may enter into some type of corporate job and they don't necessarily always learn about entrepreneurship, right? Why don't you tell us a little bit more about your journey and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. It's interesting when you talk about entrepreneurship. My dad was the classic story I was talking about earlier. He worked for a large company for 20 years. He started on the engineering side, then he was on the sales side, and then started his own business. And he actually went to a community college and took some accounting classes when he started his business to get up in understanding the business side of things. And I was at that time I was starting up. I'd gone through college and I was just starting my career. And the same thing, I wanted to work for some larger companies, to work with some mentors, to learn a lot. I knew I had a lot to learn. He actually asked me to join with him early in my career, and I took a pass on it. And partly was because I felt like I needed to learn a lot out there with other people from other companies. And so I did. I spent a lot of my career in the finance side and the strategy side and the operations side, in healthcare and in banking, and learned a lot and worked with a lot of really smart people, learned a lot from all of them. And kind of where the pivot came for me was in my master's program. I was really interested in helping people make better financial decisions and I saw that I was a $2 billion credit union at the time. I was the senior vice president of finance. And I thought a good way to learn about that is I saw a lot of the mistakes weren't on the analysis side, but it was on the behavioral side. It was on emotions or decision-making processes that just weren't helping us make the right decisions. And so I pursued some of that in the master's program I did, and I managed the investment advisors there. Well, it was during that program that was completely remote. And this was a few years ago, and it was all via Zoom. And I thought Zoom is going to change how we all do business, because I can work with anyone, anywhere. And there's all these small business owners all over the place. I can't spend the time going to their office or them coming to my office or all over the place, but we can call each other instantly through the Zoom and work together and trade information. And I thought this is going to make the cost of serving small business owners much lower. So that's really how all the ideas came together of serving small business owners. Now, little I know, a little bit after I started my business, COVID would hit, and suddenly everyone got used to working with Zoom. One of my biggest concerns with my business model when I started it was that people weren't going to be comfortable working via Zoom. And that problem quickly went away in 2020. So now, as far as the idea, though, like all entrepreneurship is, how did the company I have now evolve? And that's like all companies, you just stumble. I've said so many times, I feel like that mouse in the maze so many times. I just keep hitting my head and turning the corner and hitting my head and turning the corner. And so I actually started much more of thinking I'd do a lot more consulting and strategic planning work, things like that. As the company has evolved, I have focused much more on, another part was I was very focused on small business owners. Mm-hmm. As the company evolved, then I found a lot of interest from business advisors, and I found myself much more interested in working on tools, resources, courses, things like that. And so now the way the company's evolved is I have the series of courses and resources. I put a lot of it free on my site. There is a membership program, but also a lot of my courses are hosted on continuing education sites for CPAs. And so in a way, I've become a trained trainer. I've become the person who helps. Yes, I work with some small business owners, or I serve small business owners through the membership site. Lots of information. Now, it's not for newbies. It's for people that have their legs under them a little bit, understand the basics, and now really want to learn to go beyond just looking at a financial statement or their financials or their business, to really start making decisions with that information and understanding what they're seeing and really thinking strategically with finance, instead of how much money do I have in the bank right now? Can I write a check? So, but it's been a lot of working with those advisors, coaches, consultants, and helping them better serve their clients. And that's how the company has evolved. But it has been great to really serve just a lot through the free information on my site. I was actually scolded a month or two ago by my marketing coach. She said, "You're putting way too much on your site for free." So
I love that. I love that. That's you delivering value, right? And I love that because it leads me to sort of my next question here. You're an expert in this concept of value creation, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about this and how value creation leads to business success?
Right. Yes. So business success is where we create value for each other. And it's where owners create value for their employees and for their customers. And then the customers are willing to give value back to the owner for doing that, or the business for doing that. And the employees provide value to the company and to the customers. So it's this beautiful ecosystem, and where all that exchange of value takes place between all of us, that's where business success really lies. And where it starts, just like my business, like all businesses, it starts with an owner wanting value of some sort, and they decide that a business is the best way to gain that value. It may be monetary, it may be living out their dreams, it may be the work they love, and so they start this business, and that's how the business starts. But they can't just serve themselves. They have to serve others to make this happen. Probably the best piece of business advice I ever got was, I was the CFO of a health clinic system, and the CEO said to me, "Rob, remember, it's always about relationships." And that's really the foundation of all our transactions. They have to be built on trust. And so it's this constant giving and receiving of value where the intersection of all that is where business success lies.
Wow. Wow. No, I think that's so powerful. And, Rob, you and I were chatting a little bit about this earlier, right? About these concepts of defining values and purpose for a company. That's something I've been sort of stumbling with the last couple of weeks, but I know this is also an area where you play and sort of deliver a lot of value as well. So how do we define the values and purpose of our company?
Right. And that's why I love working with small businesses is for a small business has the opportunity to define the unique value that business provides to its ownership. Like I said, ultimately, the purpose of a business is to serve the owner. And once again, it can't just do that at the expense of others. It has to do that in the service of others. So the owner or owners has to really think about what do I want to gain from this company? What type of dream company do I want to create? For some owners, it will be just keeping it as a single employee company, maybe with virtual assistants or contractors, and that's the world they like to live in. It's one of the big decisions that's a truly strategic financial decision is how much cash do you need to pull out of this company? Some owners are going to want to create a lot of cash, and they're going to pull out that cash for their personal lifestyle needs to live a big life or something like that. Other owners aren't going to care as much about cash. They want freedom. And they may have to make a trade-off between maybe less cash and more freedom, or maybe less control and more freedom, have more paid management of the company or other people running parts of the company, and they have to let go of those pieces. Some people are going to want or don't need that cash personally, and they're going to be about growth. And everything is going to be about keeping cash in the company and growing and growing and growing. And often the plan for those companies is to just keep reinvesting and reinvesting for a large payoff down the road through some sort of through bringing in selling off parts of the company later when its value is greatly increased. And so that's the business model for those. But there's so many options. And so it's just working with people and saying, okay, what are your dreams? What do you ultimately want to accomplish? And really the big question is, why do you need a company to do this? Now, that gets back to some people may decide, I don't need a company to do this. I can do this within the company I'm at, in the role I'm at. I could do this as a side gig while I stay at my company that I'm at. I could do this through some sort of passive income stream or some sort of investing option or something like that. And so just clarifying, what are your dreams and what do you want to accomplish and what type of life do you want to live? And how is the business going to help serve this in what capacity? And that's partly because some of those questions are very cash flow driven, like I talked about, of how much cash you're going to leave in the company, how much you want it to grow. And everyone has a different risk tolerance too. And so what they're going to invest in, what they're going to do is going to be different based on their risk tolerances. And it's funny, we talk so much about that in personal financial planning and how much risk you're willing to take for how much reward. But the same thing has to be said for small businesses is what some owners are going to be willing to make the big investments or make the big chances or really invest in something that may not come out for a while, but they just are willing to take some of those risks. And really, in all honesty, being a small business owner, the odds are not super high of success of a small business owner. So just being willing to start your own small business is you have to be willing to take on those risks. You have to be willing to have built the cash reserves or the partnership, both from a technical and cash perspective, to drive you until you get through that burn rate, until you're breaking even, until you're making money, and you have to be ready for that. And so sometimes it's working with people being really eyes wide open into what they're getting into as a small business owner and building their readiness, both to start the company, but also building it for growth. I think people a lot of small business owners really underappreciate how much cash growth takes, how much time growth takes. And so helping people getting ready for that.
Oh man, you were just dropping some golden nuggets. I absolutely love that. So Rob, you have a phenomenal piece on key performance indicators, right? You and I were chatting a little bit about how maybe individuals or firms that leverage data to drive decisions, they have an upper hand, right, with respect to those that maybe don't. Could you talk to us, maybe for our listeners that might not know, what is a KPI? Why is it important? Why should people care, right? And how can it help businesses?
Right. Yeah. This has actually been the best-selling course of mine by a mile. And that's why I created the book on this, on key performance indicators. So a key performance indicator, there's no lack of data in business. I've never seen a small business owner that says, I just wish I had more metrics. I just wish I had more information to look at to help me understand my business. It's there. If you don't have it, it's there. Believe me, you just haven't looked. But that's the problem. And it's so easy to become distracted by so many different things. And so it's identifying that's the power. One of the powers of key performance indicators is clarity. A key performance indicator are the key metrics, the most important things to look at to judge the health of your company. I talk about how on your car dashboard, there's all sorts of things you can look at: the oil gauge, the speedometer, the odometer. There's all sorts of things, not counting all the radio and how warm the car is and all sorts of things. There's thousands of things you look at. You can't sit there looking at all of those when you're driving. You have to keep your eyes forward, looking out the windshield, looking out what's happening, what's coming ahead. That's your job as a business owner too. But you do need to glance down every now and then and make sure that you're on some of the key numbers you need to look at on that dashboard. And that's what a KPI dashboard is it takes all those things as you're driving your company. And it's just those few key gauges, those few key things you want to look at to make sure your company is healthy. Here's some of the benefits of that. One is the clarity piece I've talked about. There's so much to get confused about. It's really setting your priorities as a company. And once again, based on your purpose, those priorities may change. And so it's identifying, okay, there's all these things we can talk about, but these are the most important things to our success. Everything else will be secondary. And that helps people decide, helps you make decisions on where you're going to invest, what you're going to promote, how you decide if you're being successful. Second, as you work through defining those metrics in more detail, you decide exactly what success means in defining it. And let me give you some examples of that. One would be like sales. It would be easy to say, we want to drive sales up 10%. Well, you could do that through discounting or some other things, and then you're destroying profit in the name of increasing sales. And so you have to decide, okay, is it really sales dollars I'm looking at? Is it a sales margin? Is it a gross margin dollar amount? Is it a percentage I'm looking for? What am I looking at? Because you've got this fixed cost structure to cover, just the basics of paying your employees and some of the basic bills and things. And so you may need to clear a gross margin. And that's how, when you're working with small businesses and we're talking about burn rates and getting above your break-even point until you're covering your fixed costs, that's where we get into some of that stuff. But it's also, just to be clear, because what can happen is you set a metric and then there are ways to achieve it that really don't achieve your strategy. A KPI can't, even a set of KPIs can't fully encompass your strategy, but they help clarify and crystallize it a bit. And that's one of the other pieces that's the power of KPIs. In a smaller company, it's easier to talk to everyone and for everyone to understand what's going on. I helped coordinate, or I facilitated the discussion to set the KPIs at a larger company. We had, a few hundred employees, and across multiple locations. And so it's hard to get a message out of what's going about the company and what's important, what we really want everyone to be doing about the strategy. And so KPIs are a way to really take a bit of the strategy that may be a bit abstract and make it very, very practical and say, okay, we as a company, we've decided these 5 things, these 10 things, maybe these 15. That's getting out there of this is how we define success as a company. And so you set out the metrics, but then you give the context of why are we choosing these as our measures of success? Then you can kind of flesh out a little bit for people what the strategy of the company is and the context for what's going on and why we're doing these things. But then everyone has the same way of judging success and making the right decisions as a business. And so everyone can make their own decisions in support of that strategy without necessarily knowing all the ins and outs of the strategy, but they know the key things of, if I do this, it drives this metric. It will help improve this metric that we've decided is the path of success for our company. That's the power of a key performance indicator. In larger companies is the communication and clarity provides. But even for a small business, really getting that focus on the clarity helps people understand their business model. Because once again, it's just, there are people that are good at sales and production, but it's like, well, how does it all fit together as a business to ultimately create the cash or the other things I value out of the company? And KPIs are a good way to clarify that and distill that.
No, I think that's amazing, right? And you kept harping on this point of clarity, and that's a big, big focus of KPIs and what they help with, right? Where do we focus, right? Getting an understanding of a business model, like you mentioned. I think that's incredibly powerful. So definitely thank you for that. Beyond that, you've also worked with, dozens and dozens of businesses, right? Where do you see them making business decision errors or mistakes the most?
Right. Like I mentioned earlier, I think the analysis that is kind of just table stakes. I think that people do understand their business enough to know roughly how to make decisions of, should I make this sale or should I not make this sale? And if they don't, they can work with people, they can work with advisors and things like that. But is the advisor there to help them work through the deal heat in an acquisition? Is an advisor there to help them say, have you really thought through the other side of this, and someone who's not as emotionally involved? And so the mistakes, I think, happen not so much on the analysis side of a business. I'm sure, especially in a medium to large size business, there's no lack of analysis. That was my staff's job. That was my job. And we would run numbers up, down, and sideways. We'd run a conservative scenario, all sorts of things. But when you get in the room and then suddenly the wheels fall off in the decision because of some anecdotal story, or because someone says something and all of a sudden everyone in the room starts falling in line, particularly if it's like a CEO or something like that, then you realize it's the process, it's the dynamics. And so where do those mistakes lie? The biggest mistakes I see are one would be through what's called the confirmation bias. And that's where when you start to lean towards a certain decision, then you start to actually, instead of really being objective and looking at all the facts, you actually start to ignore the facts that don't support what you think you want to do. And you start to just gather support just to make yourself feel better about the decision, really. And you do this subconsciously. And so what happens is there's, and this can happen on an individual basis, and it happens much more with groups, and that's where we get things called groupthink. And so what it is it's really focusing, really doing things to promote thinking on the other side. So ways to do this are called, one way is to do the devil's advocate, is for a person to basically be tasked with arguing the opposite side. Now, they don't actually have to believe in this stance. And in fact, that shouldn't be a criteria whether they do or they don't. Their task is just for someone in the room to argue on the other side, just to make sure we have a rounded out debate about this concept. And it's for an individual, you may try to force yourself to say, okay, if I wasn't going to do this, what were the arguments I would be doing for this? It may be bringing in someone from an outside coach or consultant or something like that, who you tasked with doing this is like, okay, I just want you to throw this, just challenge me. And so that's one way to do it. Another one that's a great idea is called the pre-mortem. And the pre-mortem is, is this was popularized by Gary Klein, and you go through a thought experiment that says it's a year from now, and we made this decision, and it's a year from now, and our decision was a disaster. Why did this fail so spectacularly? What went wrong? So it's a way to think through maybe the thing that's so painful that we don't think about going into it, but it's a way to really take that and say, no, it was a failure. How in the world could it possibly failed? Particularly if we're so confident, how could it have possibly failed? And to think backwards through that, to think what could go on. I'm not saying that you do these things to stop yourself from doing these things. I'm saying that you do these things to think through the full potential of the outcomes of the strategies we make, and to really think through the outside of it. And then you can more fully make a better decision and to mitigate the risks. You may decide that you do some mitigations, or you take some steps, build some clauses into contracts, give yourself some outs if things don't work out. I like to kid. I went to school in Portland for a year, and there was this church. And when they started the church, they weren't sure that they were going to make it as a church. And so when they built the sanctuary, they built it with cinder blocks in a very kind of plain way, because they knew that if the church failed, they could still sell the building as a warehouse. And so it's the ultimate of, it was the ultimate of giving yourself an out, a plan B. And, and that's where, I mean, it's great. And we talk about, we're all in and everything, but that's not always a great strategy. So it's just understanding that we, especially as small business owners, one of the biggest things that we're prone to is overconfidence. Just the absolute belief that for some reason we're going to defy the odds, because most small businesses fail, but somehow we always believe we're going to be the ones that survive. And to say, okay, we understand we're overconfident, and so that the thing we have to balance that with is to look at, when we have these great plans, what could go wrong. And yes, they might. And to think through how to reduce those risks, how to prepare for those things. Maybe we need more cash going into this than we thought. Maybe we need more time than we thought, and to prepare for those things. And that really leads to to really going eyes wide open into our plans. I remember talking with a group of small business owners. It was a financial institution that was doing an evening event for their small business owners. And I was the speaker for this. And one of the people asked me, how much cash reserve should I have? And I said, probably 3 to 6 months of your operating expenses. That's a fairly standard guidance. And this was in January of 2020. Little did we know that 2 months later, the world was going to shut down because of COVID. And I even remember thinking in my head, wow, 3 to 6 months of expenses, that's a lot of cash just to sideline to keep there. But on the other hand, the businesses that give themselves that slack, that just in case, they were the ones who could survive through those things. In the Great Recession, as a banker, we worked with lots and lots of people who invested in particularly your big borrowers or your real estate borrowers that were making huge profits for a while, but were massively over leveraged. And then when the tide turned and suddenly they can't sell properties or cash flow the properties like they did, they were blowing up left and right. And so you realize it's the real survivors are the ones that hold back just a little bit, that understand the downside risks. And during the great times when everyone is going crazy, basically, they seem like a little bit of they're a little bit cautious, a little bit of a loser. But then I like to say the deals are in the downturns. When the tide turns, like Warren Buffett likes to say, you don't know who's swimming naked until the tide goes out. When the tide turns, they're the survivors, and they're the ones. It's tough to make a great profit margin in the good times, but they're the ones that pick up the great deals, that grab the great customers, that pick up the great properties at great discounts, and really come through with strength when in the downturns. And so they held back. They understood some of the risks. They understood the risks better, saw the things, and were ready to capture the opportunities because of that.
I love that. Wow. Right. So a lot to sort of unpack there, but, as small business owners, you mentioned we're prone to believe that we will defy the odds, right? So it's important to plan ahead, plan accordingly, look at what could go wrong and try to reduce risk. Maybe it's more operating reserves, but you need to understand the downside risk. And beyond that, right, you brought up Warren Buffett. I absolutely love that quote. And it reminds me a lot of Nathan Rothschild, right, where he says, the time to buy is when there's blood in the streets. So I think that that's so, so powerful. And I can't thank you enough for that. But Rob, it's been a pleasure getting to know more about you. And I'm sure that our listeners have picked up on some golden nuggets that they will hopefully take advantage of, right? We typically like to end our interviews with a quick response round. So these are questions that we like to pull from our listeners. So if you're game for it, I'd love to dive into them.
Let's give it a go.
Awesome. So first one here for you. If you lost it all today, what would you do?
I would start first with what I've done. When you say you lost it all, you didn't lose everything. You didn't lose your knowledge. And so you begin with your knowledge and you start from there, because knowledge doesn't require capital to rebuild from. Mm-hmm. So I would start with taking with what I know and helping people again with that. That starts to build cash flow. Once you have cash flow, then you can leverage that into other things and let your cash work for you at the same time you're letting your knowledge work for you. And that's how I'd rebuild from there. But yeah, and you've always got what you know. People can't take that from you. And that's really the value. And once again, it's all about relationships. It's not just the knowledge you have, it's who you know and who you have, and rebuilding off of those relationships. And so it's those are the investments to keep making, because if you lose the other things, those are the investments that are going to pay off in the long run.
I love that. I had a feeling you would say that. I think that that's amazing. Going forward, what do you have planned in maybe your life and businesses, and why?
All right. The ultimate reason why, when you talk about my purpose, was flexibility of time and place. And so that is the beauty of, as I went on, I realized that the courses, the tools, and the business model I'm building is one that I can, in the summers, my wife's a teacher, she has summers off. We go kayaking on the lakes around here. It's just absolutely beautiful here in the summer. So we have summers off. Somewhere down the road, she'll be retired. I'll have more flexibility and we'll go to different places. So that's really, for me, is building a business model that gives me the flexibility of time and place of when I work. And that gives me the opportunities for, for what you talked about, for the other things, for travel, for spending times with the grandkids, wherever they may be down the road, for spending time with family or being with friends on going places together as we wish, but still picking up and working with working with small business advisors and employees like I love to do.
I love that. It's a great reason there. If you could give our listeners one piece of advice today, what would it be?
Well, I feel like I've said this over and over and over, but it's really the advice from my mentor there was, it's all about relationships. That's the one I always come back to is, we could talk about the money, we could talk about ourselves and things like that, but we're really all in this together. And I really think we need to think about business much more from a community perspective. And ultimately is, the only reason these businesses are there is to really to provide something of value to other people and to help each other out. And then those people give value back to us. And we didn't go way into pricing strategy and all sorts of things, but that's really where you go down on that. But it's really helping each other out. We're all in this together, and to really build those relationships, because that's the most important thing at the end of the day is each other and where we're heading.
I love that. All right, last one here for you. How can our listeners get to know more about you and connect with you?
Like I said, I've maybe put too much free stuff out on my website. So the best place to go is to cfoperspective.com. And I've got lots of videos out there, lots of articles about there that walk you through. If you like to read things and see things, you could do it that way. I have free tools that you can download, and just lots of resources there for free. And someone last night, we had a quick talk, and I said, even if you don't work with me, please, there's so many things on my website, please take a look at it and pull what you can to help you. I wish you well.
Amazing, Rob. Again, thank you so much for hopping on the show. A lot of golden nuggets dropped here, and I hope our listeners definitely take advantage of them. But again, Rob, thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you so much.
Take care now.